Hey, welcome back. We continue to learn about the Renaissance and Reformation. Today we're going to focus on the Protestant Reformation in Germany under Martin Luther. So, during the Protestant Reformation, millions of people known as Protestants broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, leading to years of religious upheaval and war. And this means major changes all throughout Europe, not only religious changes, but also political, social, economic changes. And you learn about the key events of the Protestant Reformation and the consequences of the Protestant Reformation. So here you have two people, John Wycliffe and Desiderius Erasmus, who are both Catholic priests who end up writing against the Roman Catholic Church and their practices, their corruption or extravagance, various things that they found fault with the Roman Catholic Church at this time. So these people began to write their own ideas, challenging authority, and these are examples of humanist writers of the Northern Renaissance. And there's some different factors where the Renaissance helped lead to the Reformation. One is the more secular focus that people had, which means they're more focused on worldly ideas than they are on spiritual ideas. And they really began to celebrate life on earth. Both people and the Roman Catholic Church began to do this as well. So, for example, people and the Roman Catholic Church began to really enjoy painting, sculptures. The church began to construct new churches, fancy clothes, fancy food, banquets, all of this, which we'll talk about a little bit more with the Roman Catholic Church later. And here's some examples of artwork that is the churches. So you have Last Supper, Creation of Adam, David, St. Mark, Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's Church. All these things were commissioned by the church to be painted or built. And this is why a lot of these Italian Renaissance artists, especially, would perform these works that were religious, is because the church would commission, meaning they'd pay them to do this job. So they would go where the money is, not necessarily because they were overly religious. Another major thing that happened was the printing press. So around 1450, you have the printing press invented in Europe by Johann Gutenberg. It's easier to share information. You can share information quickly now, and information spreads very quickly, just like it does today, although obviously not as much. But rather than taking weeks to get an information out, or in some cases years, you could have information spread in a matter of a few days or maybe a week due to the printing press now. So this also is important because it starts to print versions of the Bible, which makes 20 million versions of the Bible available. And in theory, nearly everyone can read the Bible, but not everyone can read or read Latin, which was the common language for the Bible at this time. But not only the Bible, people could read other books and learn, and this caused people to think for themselves. And that is another major part of the Renaissance leading to the Reformation. So the problems of the Roman Catholic Church, you have the Great Schism, which is when the Roman Catholic Church already broke between East and West, Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. But now you have a Western Schism where you have it split up, as you can see, those who were loyal to the Pope in France versus those who were loyal to the Pope in Rome. And this really creates two popes and eventually three popes. And these popes actually sometimes call each other heretics and causes a lot of confusion for the people and divides the Roman Catholic Church up even more. So eventually you get three popes. The church comes in, has all three of them step down, and they appoint one singular pope once again, but still causes confusion and weakens the church. You have a lot of greed and involvement in politics by members of the church or even church officials. You have the eastern half now under attack soon again by the Ottoman Turks or the Muslims, just like they were under the Crusades. And then you have a lot of corrupt popes who were involved in political wars to gain their own power. Some of these had mistresses and children while they were supposed to be celibate and not have any children or women friends or relations with women. Some of them took bribes to move people to certain positions. So a lot of politicalness, a lot of corruption taking place not only by lower officials, but even the Pope himself, who was the head of the Roman Catholic Church. So they spent a lot of money on paintings, on sculptures, on constructing new churches. They spent a lot of money on politics and wars and fancy banquets and expensive clothing. And eventually this is going to lead to a financial problem for the church. And the church finds different ways to deal with this, including raising fees for sacraments, such as baptism and marriage and confession and communion. And they also began selling indulgences and relics. And relics are like remains of saints or religious people or their belongings, and they believed that indulgences could take years off your time spent in purgatory, which we'll talk about later on, and that relics could really give you special powers or lessen your time spent in purgatory as well. So the thing about the raising a feast for sacraments and why that's so important is because raising a feast for sacraments actually deprives a lot of people what they would consider a chance at salvation, because the church would raise these feasts so that the poor people couldn't even partake in these, which they had to do regularly, and without these sacraments, the Pope said only salvation only comes through the Roman Catholic Church. So without doing these sacraments, a lot of these people would face eternal damnation just for being poor. So these financial problems actually get worse when Pope Leo X takes over as Pope. He's a member of the Medici family, which is the wealthiest family in Europe for a long time and very politically powerful, and now you can see they're religiously powerful. And he makes some changes that actually make things worse. And the most notable of these is he decides to build St. Peter's Church. So from the movie, you can see him holding the model of St. Peter's Church. You can see the actual picture of St. Peter's Church there in the middle. And this is a Roman church in what's now the Vatican. He builds this as a symbol of the power of the Roman Catholic Church, and it's currently the residence of the Pope. So it's big, it's fancy, it's elaborate, everything. At a time when the Roman Catholic Church really didn't have a whole lot of money. So they're building this kind of hide the fact that they don't have money, present a front of unity and wealth without actually having that. And they're taking money from fees and from selling of indulgences and all this, and they're taking money from people, and then in return they'd give them positions within the church. So he ends up taking money from Albert, who is basically bankrupt, but Albert takes out this big loan and the Pope allows him or authorized John Tetzel or Johann Tetzel to sell indulgences to raise money to help build St. Peter's Church. And you can see Johann or John Tetzel down at the bottom giving his speech, claiming that if you did not buy an indulgence, you're going to go to purgatory, where you're going to burn for years and years and years and years while your sins are cleansed. And he would say the same thing is going on with your relatives. And if you buy an indulgence, you can go straight from purgatory or straight from death to heaven without having to even pass through purgatory if you gave to the church to help build St. Peter's Church. So Martin Luther was a German monk, spoke out against this materialism. He didn't like the selling of indulgences. He didn't like the greed and corruption of the Roman Catholic Church. So on October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther posts 95 theses. He nails these to the castle church door and sends them to go to the Pope. And he's trying to warn the Pope about what's going on. He views the sale of indulgences as being corrupt. He wants the Pope to understand what some of these people are doing. But what he finds out is the Pope's actually supporting these people, and they actually turn on Martin Luther. So there are a list of concerns with the teaching and the practice of the church. The most famous of these, and the most notable of these, was the sale of indulgences, specifically those by Johann Tetzel. Because Johann Tetzel was saying, coin in a coffer rings, a soul in purgatory springs, which means as soon as you pay this indulgence, you or your relative goes straight to heaven. He also said he could sell indulgences to people doing terrible things, including raping the Virgin Mary, according to legend, which I'm not sure that part's actually been proven, but it was believed to be true. And he also was against the selling of religious relics and, visiting these different things, which may or may not have belonged to saints or disciples, and that would take years off your life spent in purgatory if you gave money to do so. So copies of his 95 Theses were printed using a printing press. They were distributed across Germany, and pretty soon people from all over Germany and even outside of Germany were starting to read these 95 Theses, and some of these people were supporting Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther really wasn't trying to start a revolution. He was trying to create reform in the church, but that's going to go away when he is met by opposition from within the Catholic Church. He is excommunicated. He's put on trial before the Diet of Worms and told to recant or take back his teaching, saying, "I was wrong." But Martin Luther refuses. And not only does he refuse, he wants to debate and say, "Why am I wrong?" and is convinced that he is correct. He openly renounces the Pope, says the Pope is wrong, and claims that anything the Pope says is false, it's fake news, and you can't trust the Pope or the church councils. The Pope and the church councils, they vote to have anything Luther wrote burned as heresy. They're going to go ahead and convict Luther of heresy at the Diet of Worms. And Luther, while his stuff is getting burned, he claims that the Pope and everything he says and church councils say is also heresy, and burn anything written by the Pope or church councils, and that he believes only in the Bible. And he believes that faith comes not through the Roman Catholic Church, but through faith alone. So you don't need the sacraments or anything like that. You don't need to do these good works. You just need to have faith. And that way, all the poor people have access to heaven. All the Eastern Orthodox have access to heaven. And anyone who trusts and has faith in God can go to heaven, regardless of what the Pope or the Church Council or priest or anyone else says. So he said that all these decisions should be discarded, even burned, and focus just on the Bible. And he states salvation came through faith alone, not through the Roman Catholic Church. He gets very aggressive in some of his things, even calling the Pope himself the Antichrist. And this causes all sorts of problems. So he's not only excommunicated, but he's declared a heretic, which is punishable by death. He's figured he's going to burn. Charles V, as you can see in the right of the middle picture here, according to the movie, is going to go ahead, and he's a loyal supporter of the Pope, and he issues the Edict of Worms on May 25th, 1521, and this attempts to have Luther arrested or punished for heresy, which means he would be killed. However, Luther has a lot of friends who are fairly powerful, and one includes a relative of Charles V, Prince Frederick. And Prince Frederick doesn't personally do it, but he orders for Luther to be captured and taken to Wartburg Castle and hid. So this is to protect Luther and prevent him from being murdered and burned at the stake. So Luther hides out at the Wartburg Castle to be safe, and meanwhile there's all sorts of chaos going on in Germany with these peasants' revolts and everything else. But Luther himself is going to sit down, he's going to translate the Bible into German, which he believes is going to make this whole thing worthwhile, because everybody's going to be able to read the Bible and see for themselves what the Bible actually says, rather than relying on their priests or the Pope or church councils to know what's going on. Now, the problem with this is when people started reading the Bible, they had their own ideas, and people started having even more division within the church when you have the Baptists, the Anabaptists, the Calvinists, and several other groups who focus on certain issues in there and really focus on those things and have arguments or disagreements about what those things actually mean. So the Edict of Worms, which said Luther was a heretic, he should be captured and killed, he should be burned at the stake, issued by Charles V, was largely ignored. Martin Luther grew a beard, which supposedly made him unrecognizable, comes out of hiding, but at this point, Germany is in chaos. So you have this German peasant revolt where the peasants are uprising and largely inspired by Martin Luther, even though Martin Luther did not directly do this. They want their freedom, they want equality, but they're not going to get it. These revolts were put down. Luther at first was kind of neutral on these things, but eventually he's going to speak out against the revolts. He says, we need peace. He orders these people to be killed, not that he had the power to do so, but they lose their support. 100,000 peasants are dead. It's the largest revolt in European history up until the French Revolution, which we'll learn about in a couple units. And this really brings an end to the peasants' hopes of equality in Germany for now, but it does not bring an end to the violence, because now you have a series of wars between the Lutherans and other Protestants in the Catholic Church, with Charles really trying to drive out the Protestant influence in Germany. He's the Holy Roman Empire. He's supposed to be the protector of the Roman Catholic Church as far as kings are concerned. He does not like this is going on. So he forms his military to try to stop this. You have a military of alliance of Lutheran princes, which means princes who were Lutheran, who had converted to Lutheranism. They supported Luther. They were Protestant. Well, in 1555, they temporarily end this wars, and the Catholics and Protestants form an agreement where the prince would choose, if you are Lutheran, you couldn't be anything else. You couldn't be Calvinist or Baptist or Anabaptist. You could be Lutheran or you could be Roman Catholic, and the prince would decide that. But this really brings a peace, but it also creates a permanent division between the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, and the Christian Church isn't going to come back together as one ever again, at least not that I'm aware of. I don't see it happening anytime in the future. And eventually this is going to lead to the Counter-Reformation, which will be the Catholic Church trying to fight back and gain back territory or gain back believers that they lost during the Protestant Reformation. So a lot of instability in Germany, a lot of troubles from this, but eventually it will be stabilized, and you will have people having the choice of whether or not they want to be Protestant or Roman Catholic. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you later. If you have any questions, let me know. Bye.